Time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member. I'm pleased to be here today. I want to try to express some thoughts that I've had about this that may run a little counter to what you otherwise hear. I deeply regret that when it comes to the environment, we make this such a partisan issue. And I think if we're going to make progress, we need to figure out how to not make it a partisan issue. There's three areas where I feel like we're kind of missing the mark in making progress, and I'd like to briefly explain those, and then to the extent time allows, have you comment on these three areas. One of them is a word that I hear bantered around a lot that just adds to the divisiveness, which is a climate denier.
Did you go to the training?
And I think it's to be frank, frequently Republicans are accused of being climate deniers. And I've thought a lot about this. I don't know anybody personally, and I come from the state of Utah, who I claim are the best environmentalists in the world. We just talk about it in a different vocabulary. That doesn't want to leave the environment better than we found it. And I've thought about this term climate denier, and I want to kind of give it a new definition, and maybe even in doing so, I'm going to make it more divisive than it already is. But it seems to me that in this discussion, there's so much emphasis on the United States reducing carbon emissions. And if I understand the science, we're about 15% currently of the carbon that's emitted into the atmosphere. And therefore, if we're not willing to talk about the other 85%, it seems to me that the real climate deniers are the ones who are trying to put 100% of this burden on the United States and leaving out the rest of the world in this conversation, and not trying to feel like we can solve this by ourselves. So that's the first area that I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on. The second is what I see and I call the shaming, which is that we're trying to motivate people to be better environmental stewards by shaming. And I too frequently see us doing that, and in my experiences, that turns people off on this discussion instead of engaging them. And that we need to figure out a way to reward and incentivize good behavior instead of shaming the behavior that we don't like. And the third area that I would bring up for your thoughts and consideration is this concept that I call moving the bar. And that is this idea that as soon as somebody reaches a level of environmental stewardship that is better than where they've been, we're very quick to say, sorry, that's not enough. You need to do more. And we move that bar. Let me give you a really good example. I was the mayor of my city. At the time, we were heavily dependent. It was a municipal power city. We were burning almost exclusively coal. And I was told by many people, wow, if you could just move to natural gas, you would do wonders. Well, the moment we moved our city heavily to natural gas, I was told now natural gas is bad, and got the shaming effect, if that makes sense, and this is connected. So I'm kind of curious to know your thoughts on really moving forward and making this an issue that isn't partisan on these three issues, which I think are dividing us pretty substantially. And I don't know where to start, but if any of you want to jump in, and we've just got 1 minute and 18, so if you could be brief and kind of give me your thoughts, that would be helpful.
Well, thank you for that, Congressman. I think these are important points. First of all, I don't know anyone, certainly anyone in the science community, that thinks that the U.S. should solve this climate problem. 100% of the burden should be on the U.S. I don't
Let me
hear
clarify,
that from any scientists.
and I don't think it's the scientists, I think it's the politicians that I hear that from.
I think that may be true, and I will leave that to you. But that is not at all what the scientists say, but many people in this discussion believe the U.S. should be a real leader, and I think we probably can agree on that. On the shaming issue, I think that I entirely agree with you. I think shaming doesn't help in a discussion to find solutions. And the point is not shaming unless there's real malfeasance involved. Unfortunately, sometimes there is. And I think that there are intentional efforts to misinform, intentional efforts to misdirect, and I think that in those cases they should be called out. Moving the bar, I think, is a really important and interesting issue. And I would say the problem is that as a scientist looking at the natural world, when you ask, well, we got rid of coal, isn't natural gas enough? I look at the natural world and say, well, is that enough? And unfortunately, the answer is no. I'm not doing it to punish. I'm simply trying to respond as a scientist to the information.
I'm afraid I'm out of time. I would love to hear from all of you. And Mr. Chairman, if you just allow me to just say in conclusion, when I speak of shaming, I'm talking about my constituents, not people who would be on your radar, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, I've yielded my time. I wish we had a chance for you all to respond.